Well, here we are again, sitting today up near the high altar at Christchurch. And here at Christchurch, as in every church, there are special places. There are bits that are set aside for different reasons. We have the baptistry here with the font front and centre of it. We have the high altar behind me. We have the main altar, and there's about to be a lot of activity around there, creating a more dramatic space than we currently have, and other parts of the building as well that for different people at different times are special places where prayer comes more easily. Can I put it that way? The importance of special places is something that I think merits consideration at a time when so many of our special places are being denied to us. Many people lament that they cannot go on holiday, but just as many people that I've spoken to, and I'd count myself among them actually, lament the fact that the special everyday places are also in many cases out of bounds. For me, it's almost painful that the National Gallery of Victoria is closed again, for example. Thank goodness the Botanical Gardens is open this time. That's keeping my sanity in check. But the importance of special place is kind of elevated onto another level in a church context when we begin to talk about holy place. Let's start with special and move to holy. Some years ago, I was incredibly privileged to, on a trip to Ireland, to arrange via a friend of a friend to visit a small estate in Westmeath where my family comes from and where no member of my family had been for, I worked out, at least 130 years, possibly rather longer than that. And it was as I was wandering around the really quite beautiful surroundings and the dilapidated buildings that I, for the first time in my life, found myself really getting a tiny bit of understanding of what Aboriginal Australians, when they talk about going on country. Now, it wasn't that. I mean, I don't want to kind of draw too much of a parallel there, but I began to comprehend what that meant. Because as I wandered around those green pastures, there was a sense of belonging that actually shocked me. How much I felt, wow, this is actually where I come from. It was a special place. But if you talk to Aboriginal and other First Nations peoples, when they talk about their special places, they will often talk about the language of sacred sites. In other words, if I can use the phrase, holy places. And for those of us in the church, we have these holy places in abundance. But it does worry me sometimes that we treat our holy places as though they are dispensable. They're just buildings. It's just a building, we don't need it to worship. Yet God has spoken to people in the context of holy place right since the beginning. That wonderful story from Genesis that was our first reading today, the story of Jacob's dream at Bethel, Jacob's ladder, the angels of God ascending and descending, comes to an end in, for me, a really important way. And Jacob woke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." And he was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." The appearance of God to Jacob in a particular place. And God does this time and time again. Particular places are rendered holy by the presence of God, either in a dream or in prayer or in some sort of action. People talk about making trips to the Holy Land, to Israel, to Palestine. Holy places of pilgrimage matter, and so do holy places of worship. And one of the things that's really hard certainly for someone like me who's a pretty rusted on traditional kind of Anglican, the closure of holy places for worship is one of the most killing things. The most interesting discussions around this that I've seen came out of the Church of England, in particular during their long period of lockdown, where not only were the churches closed for worship, but everyone, including the clergy, were prohibited from entering them to pray. You could go in to do essential maintenance, but you weren't allowed to say a prayer while you were there. It was a very strange rule. There's been a huge backlash against those orders coming from the bishops and the archbishops in the Church of England to that level of closure, because one of the effects of it was that places that had been prayed in continuously for hundreds and in some cases even 1,000 years had fallen silent utterly for the very first time. Places that had been prayed in through civil wars and through world wars and through pandemics of the past and through plague and through all sorts of things. Nothing. The interesting question is, though, did that mean they were no longer holy? I don't think so. The lack of prayer taking place in those places, and indeed the lack of public prayer, at least, taking place even here at Christchurch, is not something that is going to render this building less holy than it was before. Though the pain, I think, if I can put it a bit dramatically, the pain can be felt in the fabric. One of the things I've found myself doing from time to time as I've walked in the morning to say morning prayer is that I've looked around and just gone, oh, poor Christchurch. Because it's painful watching these buildings that are built for people to encounter God. It is painful to watch these buildings be silent. So, there is huge value in us gathering for prayer on Zoom, on Facebook, on YouTube. There is huge value in us sitting in our homes and praying around our dining room or kitchen tables, or in the living room, or quietly in our bedroom. There is huge value in all of that, because the personal encounter with God is all important. But finding ways to gather together in place, on country, if that's not too inappropriate a phrase to use, the importance of gathering together in a holy place cannot be lost. There will come a time, and hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later, where once again we can open up the doors and people can come in. As we do so, let's not imagine that we're just gathering together to do something that we could do anywhere, because we're not. We're coming together to do something that, for me at least, and I suspect for many of you, has added meaning because of where it's done, and because of how it's done. The beauty of holiness, the worship of God that is beyond a mere private communication, but is a public expression of our faith. These things matter, as do the buildings that hold them. And that's why, at the end of all this, Christchurch will still be here, the doors will eventually open, and worship will begin anew, as we empower ourselves to be sent out for mission into the world that God loves, strengthened and nurtured by the places in which we find God face to face. The Lord be with you.